Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a really exciting review for you. This is a little bit of a shootout video. We have three really great bookshelf speakers here today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about all three, and at the end we're going to crown a winner. Now, of course, that winner is going to be based a lot on my personal preference to some degree, and arguably some things that I think it does better than the other two, whichever one it may be. You're going to find out at the end. So I'm going to take you kind of through all three of them, top to bottom, kind of what they sound like, some differences, and stuff like that. So let's just get into it. Here we have the PSB P3. Here we have the Polk Audio S15. And here we have the Emotiva B1 Plus. Now, all three are in about the $200 price category. So if you're wondering why I'm using PSB's smaller P3 and not the larger P5, which is closer to size than this, well, it's because that one's like $440. So that wouldn't make sense in a $200 speaker shootout for bookshelf speakers. So all three have vinyl wrap finishes. All three are ported designs, all three have magnetic grills, and all three have 5-year warranties, which is super cool. The Emotiva has a 30-day in-home trial, and while neither of these two have in-home trials, if you buy them from Crutchfield, you do get a, I think, 30-day in-home trial. It might be 45 days, I'm not sure. Check their website, so that's somewhat a moot point. What else here? All of them have 5-way binding posts, if I didn't say that already as well. In terms of the vinyl wraps themselves, the Polk definitely takes the cake in terms of the best looking vinyl wrap finish. This thing is just so good looking in person. You really owe it to yourself to get your eyes on it, whereas these two are going to be a little bit more plain Jane looking. The PSB P3 has a little bit of like a ash finish to it, and the Emotiva is just like a little bit of a textured heavy duty vinyl, but I feel like the Emotiva's vinyl wrap is the most durable. Let's move on to the let's get into the top end. So the top end frequencies are going to be a little bit different because this is going to use an air motion tweeter. This uses a 3/4 inch aluminum tweeter. This uses a 1-inch Terraline tweeter. So this is going to be the brightest of the bunch. It's not going to be the most revealing, but it is the brightest. So if you like a livelier presentation, you might really, really like these. Personally, I don't like a livelier presentation. I like a smoother presentation. And the smoothest of the three speakers are the Emotiva B1 Pluses. Now, for those of you that like a very neutral presentation, the PSB P3 is the most neutral of the bunch in terms of its top end and also the most revealing. That surprised the hell out of me because I originally thought these were very revealing. Then I put these on, and what I noticed with the PSB P3s is that when you're listening to music, you don't have to critically listen to notice the detail. It just kind of jumps out at you, which was a super cool thing. The only caveat to that is, while it's the most neutral and the most revealing, its detail overall did seem to lack a little bit of texture, refinement, and resolution. It was closer to the Polk S15 in terms of those attributes. The Emotiva B1 Plus actually led the pack in terms of resolution, how resolving it was, the detail and the texture of the detail, sorry. So like when a cymbal crashes, for example, like, is that sound like very textured and like very like clear and articulate? For the B1 Plus, it absolutely was. It sounded very realistic. Whereas for the other two, a cymbal crash was just a very like simple sound that occurred. Trying to think if there's anything else on the top end I want to touch on before we move on to the mid-range. No, let's move on to the mid-range. Okay, so the PSB P3 is going to lead the pack in terms of vocal performance. PSB speakers always have killer vocal performance, so that's no surprise to me. The Polk Audio's S15's mid-range, I would say, was very normal and very neutral, as was the Emotiva's. Where the Emotiva was a little bit different and better was in terms of its kind of like agility in the mid-range, its resolution in the mid-range, and just kind of things like that. Now, all three speakers mid-range though was kind of similar enough. I wouldn't say there's like one huge like winner. Unless you're like a huge fan of vocals, then yeah, I mean this just was better. But that did come with a caveat because, and we're going to move on to bass with this now, the bass on the PSB P3 is a little bit bloated in the mid-bass region, which caused it to bleed up into the mid-range a little bit. That caused the mid-range in some cases to sound a little bit on the muddy side. The Emotiva B1 Plus never sounded muddy, neither did the Polk Audio S15. However, the Polk Audio S15 did sound a little bit, I guess you could say there was not as much space between the instruments, a little bit more congested than the Emotiva Emotive B1 Plus, and the PSB P3 sounded not congested like the Polk Audio S15 did in the mid-range, but somewhat veiled, I would say is the best way to say it. But back to the bass. So this has the most mid bass out of the pack, actually. That really surprised the hell out of me because it's so much smaller with its 4-inch woofer. These other two have 5.25-inch woofers. Now they dig a little bit deeper and go a little bit lower in terms of frequency response. Obviously they have bigger cabinets and bigger drivers, but this leads the pack in terms of mid bass. If you're a fan of that and you like to hear a lot of mid bass articulation, you might really like this speaker over here. Now the Polk S15's bass, while it was quite good, was bested by the Emotivas by just a little bit. The Emotiva was a little bit fuller, a lot more natural sounding in my opinion, and just a little bit of a better presentation. In terms of like soundstage and scale, the PSB P3 had the smallest of the three, and that's no surprise, it is the smallest speaker. Its soundstage was small and did not actually increase with volume. Its entire presentation actually didn't change with the volume at all, which is quite a strange thing for a speaker. Typically, when you turn the volume up louder, the scale of the presentation improves and increases in size. That wasn't the case with these. The other two, as you would expect, when you turn them up, you get more of everything. Now, in terms of imaging, these were going to be I know I said we were going to move on to bass, right? We're still in like the mid-range and overall sound. But in terms of imaging, these image the best. Again, that's another thing that I've come to learn that PSB is just really good at. The other two didn't image poorly, don't get me wrong. These just imaged the best. These two imaged quite well as well and were at about dead even, I would say. Oh, let's see here. Is it time to move on to the bass? Let me think. Yeah, let's move on to the bass. So I guess I already did cover it somewhat, didn't I? Yeah, we did go over that. So which one do I pick then? Which one is like my choice? I would say the Emotiva Emotive B1 Plus. I said this was a shootout video and there would be a clear winner, and that's going to be the Emotive B1 Plus for a few reasons. Its soundstage is the largest. Its imaging, while not as good as the P3, was still quite good. And it was the smoothest of the bunch while still being quite revealing, quite detailed, and having the highest resolution of the bunch. That gave me a sense of that it was the most high-end sounding speaker of the three. When I plugged all three of these into cheap amps and expensive amps, the Emotiva rewarded me more with the more expensive amp, where the other two kind of sounded the same regardless if they were connected to a cheap amp or an expensive amp. I would say for these two speakers, I wouldn't spend more than $500 on an amplifier. For the Emotiva, a $500 amplifier is fine as well, but you might be rewarded up to a $1,000 or even $1,500 amplifier, but I don't think I would put more than a $1,500 amplifier connected to these. At the end of the day, you know, I think these two are definitely worth their price. If I had never heard of any of these brands and you told me these were about 250 bucks, I'd say, yeah, I think that's a fair price, having heard them. If you told me these were about 220 bucks, I'd say, yeah, I believe that based on what I heard and what they look like. But if you told me these were 500 bucks, just from me hearing them and seeing them, I'd believe you. That's about how much better I think they are than the other two. Now, do keep in mind, speakers are like food, and flavor plays a big factor. Like I said at the beginning, if you like a livelier presentation, something that's a lot more forward, fun, and exciting, you're probably going to like these the most. If you value things like your mid-bass articulation and your vocal performance, you might like these the most. But if you're like me and you like things like soundstage, scale, air, separation, decay, and that more like high-end sound, the Emotiva Emotive B1 is going to be your ticket. Its bass is also the fullest and most natural sounding. Overall, from top to bottom, I do feel like the Emotiva Emotive B1 Plus is just a little bit more refined than the other two in almost every category, except the few areas that I mentioned that the other two are better. I think that about wraps it up here, guys. If there's anything I left out, I'll leave a comment in a pinned post. In the description, I'm also going to put the individual review for each one of these speakers. You do owe it to yourself to check out those reviews before making an opinion. And at the end of the day, I hope this video did help you make an opinion if you were considering any of these three. But yeah, this is the one I picked. This is the one I like the most. I think it's just a little bit better than the other two in just about every category except the few that I mentioned. If you have any questions, ask in the comments. And I'm looking forward to getting out of this position because my ankles feel like they're going to break. Until next time, later.